What's going on, everybody? Welcome into the Guilty as Charged podcast. My name is Tyler. This is my first time hosting something live, so if everything goes terribly, it's my fault. I'll just have Steven do this from here on out. But today we're going to be talking about the state of the defensive line and the edge rusher group, just kind of a recap of everybody overall, some of the guys that are pending free agents and some guys that are looking to have roles next year, maybe to increase their roles next year, what went well, what's not going so well. And to do that, of course, I've got to bring in Gavino Borquez from ChargersWire. Gavino, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. I'm excited for this offseason.
Excellent. Sounds good. And sorry, everybody, for the delays. Things happen, internet issues, all that good stuff. But before we start, just to let a couple more people trickle in, I just want to get your sense and your feeling of how the season ended. Where are you at? We kind of messaged each other already that we're obviously very bummed. But how do you feel the Chargers season went overall? And then how do you feel about that last game?
I gotta say it was a success overall. Obviously, you want to make the playoffs. You want to see your team in the playoffs. But given first year under Brandon Staley, all in all, I'd say it was a success. Primarily on the offensive side of the ball. The defense, it was kind of a mess. Obviously, you have a system change, and with that comes the personnel that doesn't exactly meet that. And a lot of it comes from the defensive line, which we're going to address here. But it seemed like it was just an ongoing issue. And again, just the lack of talent, but also you don't have the players that match match the system. And again, despite it being a defense that you're going to be more inviting to the run, you still need players that are going to make plays in that department. And it seems like they're going to go that direction this offseason.
Yeah, one can hope. I think everybody at this point is on board with them going defense if right tackle is solved in free agency at some point. So we're going to start with Uchenna and Nwosu film. Just quick recap on his season: 40 pressures, 5 sacks. A little bit inconsistent to start the year. We really didn't have that dominant flash from him, and then you'd have some dominant flashes the second half of the year. But he was a little bit inconsistent. We have 7 pressures, then 1, then 4, then 1, then 1, and then 4 again. We see the big flashes in big games. Let's say the Bengals game, the Chiefs game, the Raiders game to end the year. But then sometimes, like against the Texans, he'll disappear. So interested to see where you go with this film. Let's get into it. Here's our first set of plays from Uchenna and Nwosu.
Yeah, so it seems like the run defense, all in all, was awful the entire game. I mean,
Yeah.
there's no denying that. But if there was one player that showed up in that department, it was Uchenna Nwosu. It looked like he was playing for a contract extension, whether that be with the Chargers or a new contract with a new team. So this first play happened early on, and you got Mariota the quarterback position. So and you have Uchenna Nwosu right here on the wide. So what he's going to do is Uchenna Nwosu is going to read that. He's not going to fall for the fake, so he's going to stay at home right there. And also, I want to point out too with Tillery right here. So this kind of goes to show the good in him. You have him lined up against Colton Miller, so he's getting some push, but he's recognizing the play. So he's not going to get beat like most plays throughout the season. So you have Uchenna Nwosu. He reads that play. He doesn't fall for it, so he stays home. And Tillery, he beats Colton Miller, beats the tight end here. Again, reads that. Both of them get home. Great play, because that's easy to fall for a fake like that. So for him to be able to read that quickly and to not lose contain like that, that's a good play by him overall. With this next play, he's just going to simply beat the pulling guard right here. So this is just great play to evade it. A good quickness to penetrate the backfield and make this stop for a loss here. So he's going to get the puller right there. He's going to evade that. He's going to make a stop for a negative play. And again, with Uchenna Nwosu, he is probably one of my favorite defenders. He has been, in my opinion, is how well he's played the run since he's come into the league. But even then, like how he played in college as well, he seemed like he was always a consistent player. And he was my first film review, so it was kind of cool to see him like come into his own each year. And this game exactly exemplified everything that he can do well, aside from just getting after the passer. And this next play is going to be a sack right here, so nothing crazy. Again, you don't want to give him a free play right here, so he's going to evade this tight end right here, and for him to be able to turn this tight corner right here and to get to Derek Carr. So right there, again, something like Kenneth Murray would probably do, would just run himself out of the
Oh no.
right, but just be able to like turn this corner right here and to get to Carr like that. That's a good play right there. Again, it was unblocked, but that's the name of his game right there, is to be able to get upfield, win speed to power, and just pure effort. And again, we see it right there. Just speed, get up the field, avoid congestion, and then get there for
Mhm.
the sack.
No,
And then
his
with his
athleticism is clearly on display.
athleticism
It's
right there,
incredible. I mean, it's amazing.
and with Brandon Staley too, what he covets with his edge rushers is that explosiveness too, and we see that as soon as he gets off the ball, he exemplifies that. Counters much. He's going to kind of just rely on that athleticism to get into the backfield. And this next play right here, he's lined up opposite of the right tackle, and this is just one of the pass deflections. So again, he got his hands on a few balls he has, and including one that he ended up turning over, getting an interception earlier this season. But again, this just goes to show he's able to read that Carr's throwing the ball to get his hands up in the air. And again, this is a guy that doesn't have that long of arms right there. So like for him to deflect that many passes, again, he has the coverage skills coming out of USC. Um, it carried over with him into the pros, and that's definitely a good sight to see overall. With the amount of pass deflection that he had in the NFL, the number doesn't come off the top of my head, but it was only a matter of time until he turned one of those into an interception, which he did a few games before that. So before I go over Justin Jones a little bit, did anyone have any questions in regards to Uchenna?
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, it is a live stream, so feel to throw those questions in. Of course, if you want to sit in a super chat, you absolutely can. If you have any questions about Uchenna and Nwosu, go for it. I guess the big question then that I'm sure a lot of us are thinking is at this point in the season, because I know the last time we spoke about Nwosu, it was a fantastic game against the Bengals, and it looked like he was trending towards as someone that the Chargers must re-sign. At this point, like I said, it's a bit inconsistent game to game, but overall, at this point, do you think that they retain Uchenna and Nwosu, and is he a true edge rusher two opposite Joey Bosa?
With how he played against the Raiders, he definitely looked like one. Again,
Yeah.
he was the guy that I was on the fence. I would rather go with the guy with like Harold Landry or Hassan Reddick when we last talked, but with how he played against the Raiders, he definitely changed my mind. And with continuity being a big thing nowadays, I could see him coming back and him playing opposite Joey Bosa. Now, again, it all depends on what the coaching staff thinks. Can he like maintain that consistency? Is he better than some of the other options, and also from a financial standpoint too? Because again, he's not going to be cheap with how he played. So I guess it just depends on the market, who's available. But if we're talking in terms of bringing back players, so that way they can establish that continuity, Uchenna falls into that category, and he's certainly a starting edge rusher in this league.
Yeah, no, I agree. And when you look at even just the pass rush win rates, he's always in that right category, upper right category with someone like Joey Bosa. So hopefully a better interior defensive linebacker, better secondary will take that pass rush win rate and translate that to more production. Question here from Jonathan Franco, which is an interesting one to consider. Has Uchenna Nwosu hit his ceiling at this point? Does he still have a lot more room to grow? A little bit room to grow? Is this kind of it for him? Is this the most we can expect from him? What do you think?
What's he going to be? Is he going to be 26 at the start of the season? I believe. I think he's 25. He's
Sure.
26. He's still. I mean, with him finishing up his first year of his contract, I think there's still room to grow. And considering the fact that this was his first year in Brandon Staley's system, again, I think we were all hoping for some Leonard Floyd type of production like he did with the Rams. But for him to be able to put up the amount of pressure that he did, and then just the sacks, I would say it was a win overall, and I don't think he's hit his ceiling. Again, with another full off season to be able to work with him, I think the best is yet to come with Nwosu, and that's why I think it's compelling to bring him back for another few years. Because again, they can dip into the free agency pool, they can go with the draft, but I think you're looking at a guy that earned each penny, especially
Mm,
the final stretch of the season. Yes, of course, it was kind of inconsistent the beginning of the season. We were going to scratch our heads like, what?
right.
Like, I thought this guy was going to be someone that was going to have that Leonard Floyd type of production and just display on the field, and he didn't. But he came into his own. It was a game against the Bengals. I think we talked about that for a little bit too.
Mhm.
But when Joey Bosa went down with a head injury, and that's when he started to raise some eyebrows and
Right.
garner that type of play that we were all hoping for coming to the end. So I think he hasn't hit a ceiling. I still think that he can even possibly hit double digits, and especially with them addressing or supposed to address the
Mhm.
interior part of the defensive line, that's also going to help.
Yes, absolutely. One more question here from Juan Gonzalez. You don't have to answer it right now. I kind of want you to just keep it in your mind and everybody keep it in their minds because I know you're going to get to Chris Rumph eventually. But if they resign Nwosu, do they use a draft pick in the top 4 rounds on an edge player? You don't have to answer it now because I know you'll get into Chris Rumph in a bit. So maybe after Chris Rumph, we can talk about whether you think he's shown enough where he can be that edge 3, or do the Chargers need to invest more in the edge rotation, at least in the first 4 rounds? Okay, so I know
Yeah,
you want to get into Justin Jones, so we'll jump into that. And real quick, I'll just go over the stats from his year. Not a lot of stats. Unfortunately, he's a guy that just is very inconsistent, but it's more due to injuries. He did go from 14 pressures and 1 sack to 18 pressures and 2 sacks on 25 fewer pass rush snaps. So that is kind of there for him. And you can tell there are many, many games where he makes great plays, where he looks like the best interior defensive lineman on the team. He arguably is. But then, of course, you have the inconsistencies with injuries. He's a free agent for the team. But let's jump into the film right now.
yeah, and with Justin Jones too. Again, he is a guy that was arguably the best or the team's best run defender. Guess you can make the argument for Linval Joseph last year too, but he showed up last year as well, and that's why I was excited for him as everyone else was coming into the season. But in regards to him remaining with the team after this season, it's going to be tough. I mean, you can make an argument for both points, keeping him and letting him go. And again, this season he was probably the most consistent run defender for the team, and the way he won was gap quickness, threatening gaps, just getting upfield. Like this first play that I'm going to show you, where he's lined up against Alex Leatherwood here. So there would be plays on occasion where he'd get blown off the ball too. He's definitely stronger than Jerry Tillery. So in terms of like his anchor and everything, he's stronger than Jerry Tillery in my opinion. But he would win purely off of just getting into the backfield and blowing up plays like here. So what he's going to do is just show some good lateral agility to avoid the block right here. He's going to be able to get there, make the play. Um, and I mean, it's cleaned up, but you can kind of see here that, let me rewind it quick, to be able to work laterally like that and then avoid the block right there and then get upfield. Nasir Adderley cleans it up, of course, but that's how he won on a lot of his reps right there, was just getting upfield. Um, so you rewatch the tape of Justin Jones. He's going to be just one of those up the field penetrator type of guys. And again, so I know we blame Jerry Tillery for getting blown off the ball. Yes, Justin Jones fell victim to that, but he was strong enough to be able to hold his own too. And again, with the run defense issues, he wasn't certainly the issue because he would make plays like that too, but he wasn't always perfect. And again, that's going to be one of the things that they evaluate when they, in terms of who they let go or who they keep. And then with this next play right here, he's been working up against the left guard, and I just want to show the pass rush rep. And again, Justin Jones has been known for being like the best run defender on the team, but he doesn't get enough recognition as a pass rusher too. While it didn't show up as much, again, he's gonna be a guy that's going to rely on getting up the field. And again, he's swiping the hands right here and still working up field. He pressures Carr, ends up being an incomplete pass. But again, I just wanted to show a lot of this film right here that I'm gonna show you is just from the Raiders game. So I can like pull up a bunch of tape with Justin Jones and just go over that. Like again, he made a lot of solid plays in the backfield too. He held his own at the point of the attack for the most part. And again, statistics don't lie. As when he was on the field, there was major improvement. It's unfortunate that it couldn't carry over to the most important game of the season. But again, he was a very important part of the defensive line. And, it's just one of those things where he's in the final year of his season. So he made strides each season. And is he going to be a guy that's worth keeping around? I would say so, but at the same time, what is the cost? And at the same time, with a lot of the guys that are under contract, what I have on my mind too is, are they going to blow it up just like they did with the offensive line too? Like again, you can make the case for Justin Jones, but how much of them do they just want to let go of? Because you'll have Linval Joseph, Justin Jones, Christian Covington, like three key contributors right there. But just from the sounds of it, with just Brandon Staley, I think he's going to be looking at it from like a product as a whole too. And yes, Justin Jones played very good when he was on the field too. But just with how they went about like the offensive line, yes, it was terrible. Now we switched gears to the defensive line. It kind of makes me think that he's going to have that type of approach to the defensive line. Just let them walk and then take the free agency and draft approach too. But that's just me. Again, if this wasn't such like a new coaching staff, if this wasn't like an issue all around, I'd say bring him back. But part of me thinks that he's just going to blow it up altogether. But in my opinion, again, Justin Jones was a consistent run defender. The stats don't lie. When he was on the field, the run defense altogether was better. He supplied some pass rush presence. Yes, it wasn't there, the all around, but again, he was still a pretty solid player, and he's still young too. So again, you can make the case for bringing him back, but part of me thinks that he's not going to be back because of the just blowing it up altogether and just starting fresh with new guys.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. Justin Jones has been a guy that we've heard is going to have
And
his breakout
also another
season
thing
from.
was the injuries too. That's another thing
Yes,
I think is going to
exactly.
be a factor too.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I don't I hesitate to say it's like a Forrest Lamp situation because like the potential is there, but he just can't stay on the field. I think Justin Jones was a better interior defensive lineman than Lamp was at the end as a guard. But I still think, yeah, you have to weigh in the fact that Justin Jones is a good player when he's on the field. But if he's only on the field for 35% of the team snaps, what are you going to do with that? Especially if you have someone like Jerry Tillery. So, if you have Tillery who is maybe not that great, and then you have Justin Jones only playing, 40% of your snaps that year, that's just not a good recipe. So I could definitely see them blowing it up. Obviously, they have to work with someone like a Jerry Tillery. He's going to be the starter next year, I would assume. But yeah, them blowing it up kind of makes sense. Justin Jones is a guy I could totally see them keeping, but like you said, there's so much to weigh in, and I could see them blowing it up too. So either
Do we
way,
have
I'm
any
kind of okay
questions
with.
in
Yeah,
regards
so if
to?
anybody has any questions in the chat, please feel free to jump in. Of course, people are saying Akeem Hicks time. Sean O'Brien says Akeem Hicks time. At this point, it's actually a surprise to look at the difference just in terms of the numbers, in terms of pass rush win rate and run stop percentage between someone like an Akeem Hicks and Justin Jones. Justin Jones, well, I see making plays frequently for this team, yet if you look at where he ranks among interior defensive linemen when it comes to run stops or pass rush win rate or productivity, he's in like the 60s or 70s, where someone like Akeem Hicks is in the 20s, if not like the early teens. So it's a bit of a surprise to see Jones that far down, but the upgrade with Hicks, it could work, especially in an all-in year. Do you expect him to be your guy for years to come? Not really, but for 1-2 seasons potentially. What do you think about someone like Akeem Hicks, Gavino?
I think they should look to bring him in. Again, I have my preferences too, and I could see him being brought in. Again, he is very familiar with Brandon Staley too, and what he brings in terms of that pass rush presence as well as against the run. So again, you have some lingering injury issues that you have to weigh, of course. But when he's on the field, he's definitely really disruptive. And again, if everything all checks out, I could see him being brought in. And again, like a Sebastian Joseph Day is another guy that I like. Again, another a player that Brandon Staley's familiar with, that I could see him liking in terms of bolstering the defensive line with what he brings against the run too. But if we're looking at just like one of that splash signings, Akeem Hicks probably sits at the top of the list.
I like it. I'm all for it. Again, like you said, we could blow it up, see someone like Hicks and Joseph Day, a whole new interior defensive line, draft pick, plenty of options, plenty of money, plenty of cap space, plenty of draft picks. So we'll see what they do there. Okay, so I believe we're on to Jerry Tillery next. Am I correct?
Yep. So we're on
Okay,
to Jerry Tillery, everyone's favorite player.
everyone's favorite player. Okay, so just a really quick recap his season. He went from 35 pressures and 3 sacks in 2020 to 31 pressures and 5 sacks in 2021 on 20 more pass rush snaps. So the pressures are down, the sacks are up. I don't know how you feel about him as a run defender, but I guess we're about to find out. So let's hear it, Jerry Tillery. Let's see this film.
Yep. So right here, we're gonna have Jerry Tillery working against Colton Miller, and this play stood out to me
Hmm.
in specific because with him, he had quite a few looks off the edge, and coming into his rookie season, myself included, I felt like he was better off lineup off the edge too, in terms of like what he, playing him both inside and outside in terms of the pass rush presence that he brought. And this play stood out to me in particular because of how well he's able to get some pushback into like against a guy like Colton Miller right here too, considering that strength is an issue of his. But when he's working upfield like how he does, and he's able to has his matchup one right here. But again, to be able to push Colton Miller like that, again, Colton Miller still does a good job of holding his ground. That's pretty solid right there.
Mm-hmm.
And this kind of has me leewaying into his role potentially next season. Again, because while people want him off this team, you're not going to see Telesco let go
Right.
of a former first rounder. So then it comes down to finding a role for him too. Yeah, he's going to grow as a player. He's still really young, but in terms of like as a situational pass rusher like that right there, um, that's a good sign right there.
Mm-hmm.
I think he had 4 sacks, and I believe 2 of them he won with the side scissor move, which Joey Bosa is notorious for.
Oh,
So it
good
just
call.
goes to show that he's learning a thing or two. So each year, yes, he hasn't looked like a first round pick, but he's shown something positive. And this like really stands out to me too, is like maybe next year we're going to see more of him coming off the edge. Because again, he still offers that presence in the interior, but he's a liability against the run. So maybe putting him in situations where he's going to be more of a favorable matchup like that. So that one stood out to me too. But again, there are positives when he plays the run. And like right here, he's going to be lined up in this gap here. And when he's lined up directly, he does show good stack and shed ability. So he's going to be lined up right here. He's not going to get blown off the ball like a lot of people are used to right here. So to be able to like stand this offensive lineman up and to be able to shed him, prevent Jacobs for minimal gain. Like again, yes, we look at the cons with him a lot, but he did show that a lot on film was his ability to stack and shed when lined up one-on-one with offensive linemen, and that's just another play right there. So yes, when he gets doubled, he doesn't have that anchor strength to be able to hold his own. So again, we see that right there. I could basically show every single run play here and like break down, but like I'm gonna keep it to a minimum. And I just wanted to show those 2 plays because, and actually, there's gonna be a bad of Tillery. It's gonna be at the very end of this film right here, and then I'll show you what he does bad and why they might want to create a rule to kind of put him in just more of pass rushing situations, which I'll get to in a little bit. But in terms of Tillery, I think he's a fine player. I think they drafted him for that interior pass rush presence, and
Mm-hmm.
with him getting 4 sacks and the pressures don't come to the top of my head, or I don't remember what you said exactly. But again, when he won cleanly. And I told
Mm-hmm.
you, I think 2 of those sacks were coming with the side scissor move, which just goes to show me like he's picking Joey Bosa's brain. But to see that type of development, I mean, it was definitely an improvement from last year in that department. And then against the run, it's been the same. And even coming out of college, I even put it in there. And I get a lot of flack because I predicted the pick. Basically, I wrote a whole article about it.
Mm-hmm.
People are gonna go find it too. But as far as like his anchor against the run, that's always been an issue coming out of Notre Dame too. And it comes with a strength thing, a leverage thing. He's a tall guy. So again, there's
Yes.
a lot of times where he's just standing up straight and he's going to get just washed out of the play. And there are factors in there, but it doesn't mean that he's a horrible player because it seems like we hear one thing, we go with it, or if there's a big gain, it's always Tillery's fault. Yes, there are times it's fault, but doesn't mean that it always is. So in a role where it's just strictly a pass rusher on money downs like that, I could see them finding a role for him next year because you're not going to see him off this team. I can almost guarantee you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can't imagine Jerry Tillery's off this team, and to a certain extent, he's deserved a role on the team. I think everyone is not thrilled with him being a full-time starter, and they want to see maybe some other interior defense linemen on the team get more snaps. But, he deserves to have a role. He is a good pass rusher on occasion, if not even frequently. There are some games where you can see it working. I mean, he was arguably the best defensive lineman on the team when they played the Chiefs. You broke that down for us. There are so many good plays against a very, very good Chiefs interior offensive line. The flashes are there. It's not always super consistent. And as far as the numbers go, it's 31 pressures and 5 sacks. So if 2 of those were with the pass rush move that Joey Bosa had been showing him, that's
Side
great.
scissors, yeah, and
Yeah.
they were clean, and that's why, yes, he
Mm,
gets a lot of flack, but he does deliver that pass rush ability, which is crucial.
yes.
The Chargers team did not have that at all, and that's also another factor in terms of the pass defense in general, and then also being able to clear up the edge defenders is that they didn't have any sort of pass rush presence on a consistent basis. So I
Mhm.
think that's going to be a factor when they do their offseason evaluations on who they bring because they need more of that consistent pass rush ability in the middle of the defensive line, not just pure run defenders. Because I think
Mhm.
that's what we're looking at. And that's why we always point to Jordan Davis to the Chargers. I'm not going to get into that, but I've got my pros and cons on him. I
Mhm.
won't say if they should take them at 17 or not yet. Defenders, being able to clog gaps, you have to look to see if they are well rounded enough to be able to get to the quarterback as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I was looking at the pressure numbers for the 2 edge rushers after Bosa and Nwosu, and I believe Fackrell and Rumph combined for 16 total pressures behind them. Like, that's just not good enough. The team needs to find more pass rush productivity behind the obvious starters, and that's assuming Nwosu even comes back. So, yeah, I completely agree, but yeah, Tillery having a role is just fine. I know you don't have any Kenneth Murray film, if I'm not mistaken, or at least no direct reps from him, but I do have to ask because I think we were all surprised by what we're seeing right now on your screen, which is Kenneth Murray as a starting linebacker and sometimes the starting linebacker with Kaiser White off the field. What were your impressions of that? How did you feel about that, and were you surprised?
Um, very surprised because I really thought that if they were wanting to defend the role, defend the run, and have
Mhm.
success, that they would have Kaiser and Drew on the field. And again, coming from Kenneth Murray being strictly off the edge, before like the games prior to, and then to see him man the middle of the defense in this game, I was shocked. And again, he was probably the biggest disappointment of this team,
Yep.
and it showed when he was on the field.
Yeah.
Because again, I watched this film, and again, I can get into a full breakdown. Just him being able to disengage from blocks that wasn't there, reading and reacting, it just flowing with play, following for dismissed directions and all that. So it was just all bad. Everything that he was doing at the beginning of the season, it carried over, and
Mhm.
I was wondering why in the most important game of the season are you gonna have him be the man in the middle of the defense? So if we're looking at it, yes, you can blame the interior defensive line, but you also have to look at it from a personal standpoint of the decision to put Kenneth Murray back at the linebacker spot.
Yes. No, we were all certainly surprised. I was sitting in the stands with Steven and a couple other Chargers fans, and we're like, "Wait, okay, White is healthy, right? Tranquil is back. Why is Kenneth Murray the sole
Who's
linebacker?"
the new number 9?
Right, exactly, right. Did we sign somebody else from Denver or something? What did we
Yeah.
do? Nope, that's Kenneth Murray. Oh, there's a pass interference. Oh, there's a this or that. It's like, oh, great. That was a long day for but we'll get into that another time. Let's stick with the defensive line. I believe this is Christian Covington, right?
Yep. This is Christian Covington, and again, I'm not going to go into too much depth like I did with Tillery, Jones, and Nwosu, but it's just one play to show what he did well. I thought he was actually pretty underrated for the Chargers,
Hmm,
and they
okay.
signed him earlier before the season. And with his role, I thought he did well. Field, so he's just avoiding these blockers here, and he's just going to sidestep to his left right there, avoid these 2 blockers right here, and to be able to get through that gap, just rip his way through. But again, he's the other guy that I feel like they have to, you know, factor into
Mhm.
their plans, of course. And I thought he played well. Nothing good. Nothing nothing great. But again, in terms of how we talked about earlier, blowing up this entire defensive line, um, I could see him just walking altogether. And I feel like we don't talk about him as much as Justin Jones or a
Mhm.
Linval Joseph. Which again, with Linval Joseph, I don't have any film because I use this game particularly. But with those two, Covington and Joseph, Joseph being the more polarizing out of the two,
Yes.
I think they let him go because of personnel. And yes, he's a nose tackle, but I think they need to get more athletic at that position. They don't need just a pure a guy that's going to clog up gaps. Yes, he won in one-on-one situations. One in particular play that comes to mind is where he forced Creed Humphrey to hold with
Mm-hmm.
just an arm over. But again, he's 34, so he's getting up there in age. Yes, he supplies that locker room presence and especially that veteran presence for that group, but you can get it elsewhere. So I think with Covington and Joseph, they certainly walk, but with Justin Jones, he would be the one that's kind of on that fence because he played well enough to deserve another contract. But again, I just want to include that play because again, he doesn't get talked about as much.
Mm-hmm.
But with him, he was another guy that relied on just that gap quickness to get into the backfield too. And I
Mm-hmm.
thought he did a fine job, and he showed up in spurts. But when he did, you knew that he was in on that play.
Yeah, no, he was a guy who came in and just we were desperate at the time that before they signed him, we were wondering, oh, please have another option behind Tillery, Jones, and
Yeah,
Joseph. Like, there's no way it's just actually going to be Gaziano and Brown and for Hooker or whatever it was. So them signing someone like Cortez Brown was great, or not, excuse me, Christian Covington is great. And then Linval Joseph, yeah, unfortunately, started off so well, especially in that Eagles game, 16 pressures total on 252 press rush snaps. He started hot with 11 pressures and 20 run stops through the first 8 games. And then from there, only 5 pressures and 8 run stops the rest of the way. It was a bit of a surprise to see him decline so quickly like that. About that midpoint of the season, he was a must re-sign. Why let him go? He was playing very well. Then at this point, or towards the end of the year, just through no fault of his own, really battling COVID and I believe injuries, just was not quite the same. So it'd be interesting to see what they do with him. But yes, if they blow up this defensive line, I do believe it starts with Joseph, and then Christian Covington depends. I could see him back because he's good in his role. But then I would also like to see them make way for Braden Fajoko, perhaps. So, again, another story for another time. There's no Braden Fajoko on here, right?
no, but if you go to my Twitter, I posted a play like about an hour ago, and again, it's just him winning at the point of attack, being able to hold his own. Which again, you don't have a lot of interior defenders on this team that show the ability to do that, and so
Hmm.
he was probably the best run defender. When we're not looking at pure strictly amount of snaps again because he
Hmm.
wasn't on the field as much. But like when he was on the field, it seemed like he was always making a positive play, whether it was holding contained for a linebacker or a guy at the second level to make a play, or simply just making a field making a play at the line of scrimmage or in the
Hmm.
backfield. So
Yeah.
and he showed in the preseason too, and that's why I'm surprised that he
Yes.
didn't get more snaps. But again, we don't know that, and we can only hope that he doesn't end up on the practice squad next season. So
Oh God. Yeah, we'll certainly see. I think we were all surprised when, based on the numbers, like, okay, here we go. Fajoko is, not a huge sample size. It's just a preseason. It's not like he's played a ton, but he was better than the other guys. Then they cut him, bring it. It's a whole other saga and story. But the guy finished with a higher run stop rate than any other defender in the entire league with a minimum of X amount of snaps or whatever it was. So hopefully he gets some sort of role. Do I think he's a starter? No, he wants to be a starter. He wants to be an all pro at some point, like everybody does. But him being like a nose tackle too, maybe even that Covington role, wouldn't hate that. All right, who do you got next,
before we get
Gavino?
into the final
Yep.
stretch, did you want to pull up any questions? One, I have to grab my charger right here, but
Yeah,
see what the people have to think before we head into these final four plays.
yeah, absolutely. Everybody feel like, or excuse me, everybody feel free to throw in a question. Gavino's grabbing his charger right now. Right now, a lot of people in the chat are talking about put in Forrest Merrill, which isn't quite a a question. Someone they're saying Merrill over Donald. That's not really going to work. Someone saying is
We have a
Merrill is
Forest
worse than
Merrill
Michael.
fan club.
Yes, the Forest Merrill fan club is real. Alex, who's in the chat right now, says Eric Banks mega contract. I hope not. I hope not. That was a disaster from the second it happened. We all knew that, and here we go. All right, so I guess a big debate then. If Linval walks, would you draft a nose tackle in the first? The issue and the debate being, do you take someone that primarily is a fantastic run stopper, but do you take one that can only really stop the run at 17, or do you look elsewhere? I know you don't want to quite say yet. I guess then, what are your thoughts on taking a pure nose tackle? Don't have to say who in the first round at 17.
All right. Yeah, I'm not going to say if I do or not, because I have a mock draft. Again, that's not going to be the exact answer if I would or not, but
Okay.
I just feel like the Chargers could upgrade their cornerback room. That's probably my favorite, or the offensive tackle position. That's what I would want them to do.
Right.
With Jordan Davis, he is the talk of the town. He's going to be mocked to the Chargers. Again, this is probably one of those years where I'm trying to think of a good example. Who was a commonly mocked player to the Chargers? That
Well, sort of Justin Herbert.
it was Justin
Uh,
Herbert, but it was. I'm thinking of when we took Jerry Tillery. It was Dexter Lawrence. Dexter Lawrence was
yeah.
a very popular pick, and that one seemed like it drew a lot of people's attention, a lot of debates. I think that's kind of what I relate it to a little bit, but at the same time,
Okay.
Dexter Lawrence is playing really well for the Giants right now. But again, with Jordan Davis and just the nose tackle all together, I think you can just look at rounds later on in the draft. I feel like with the production, especially at the position, and then just in terms of the player that he is, you might be better off looking elsewhere in terms of the draft later on, because I'll do like a full breakdown of Jordan Davis. I'm a firm believer that his teammate Devontae Wyatt is better, and Devontae Wyatt's the player that I may even consider taking the first round. But just in terms of like what I think the Chargers want to do, I think they need to get more athletic at the position. They don't need like the wide body type of interior defensive lineman to clog gaps and all that. They need to be able to get a guy that's going to be stout at the point of attack to allow second level players to make plays on the football, but to be able to supply that pass rush, and also have the conditioning to play more than two downs too.
Right.
So that's an important factor to me, and I feel like we always do this with nose tackles. And I know people are going to say, but what about Vita Vea and all that? He didn't seem to have that issue at Washington coming out of college, but with Jordan Davis, there's certainly questions, and it's evident. Yeah, and I know that he would help with this run defense, but what else is he going to bring to the
Right.
table, and how consistent is it going to last? Because that's one of those positions. We always have one of the big nose tackles that garner first round attention, it seems like. And we haven't heard of one in a little bit because they needed to address the offensive line most importantly, but we're back to that position.
Yes.
But I
Right.
feel like, in my opinion, I just like going with an offensive tackle or a corner. In terms of edge defender, I was leaning towards it, but I feel like with how deep this group is, kind of like the interior defensive lineman, they could find one later on. But that'd be my preference, is cornerback or offensive tackle. So
Yeah.
would I be mad if they took Jordan Davis? No, but preference, it wouldn't be at the top.
Yeah, and I certainly hope they don't go into the draft with like, okay, we have no nose tackle, so we should take one at 17. Like, if they go into the
I just think
draft
they need to get
without,
more athletic at that position
yeah,
too.
exactly. And that's kind of the way they've shown they want their interior defensive line. Limo Joseph dropped weight. They asked for Hoka to drop weight so we could play different positions. I believe Justin Jones has been dropping weight, so they're not looking to get bigger and wider. They're looking to be more like a gap shooter sort of quicker interior defensive line, in my opinion. But I mean,
This is
that
Brandon
certainly
Staley,
could
not
change.
Gus Bradley, guys.
Yes, yes, yes. Some have asked for Gus Bradley back. Let's not do that again, though.
Oh man.
But we've reached a point in the year, but hopefully that gets quelled next year when the defense is a lot better. All right, so I believe we have one more player to go through right here.
Not even a player, just one play, and it's everyone's favorite play of the game.
This play.
This
That's great.
is
That's great.
what capped off this game, leading to the game-winning field goal. So again, we have the interior looks like Justin Jones, Joseph, and Tillery right here. So this goes to show how much of a liability that Tillery is against the run right here. So he's going to get completely washed out again. So they're going to take him out. He just again gives up his back, which he did a lot. And once he gives up his back like that, he's out of the play. So I get he was trying to go through this gap right here. But again, he gets their hands on him. He's just washed out of the play right here. In terms of I'm just going to kind of break down this play. So we have Joey Bosa right here. He's setting the edge. Kaiser White kind of loops around. So he's late to Jacobs right there. So instead of taking this direction going up, so he's trying to loop around right there. And then you have Joey Bosa gets off his block, attempts to tackle. You have Linval Joseph coming down, trying to make a tackle right there. Misses a tackle by Asante Samuel, and then it's Justin Jones that finally cleans it up too. But there was just a lot that was going on. But in terms of the interior front, when you get washed out like that, and Tillery, he takes himself out of the plays by just giving up his back. And once you do, you're done. So that comes around pretty frequently too. Mm-hmm. So those are issues that have been on tape for years now and dating back to college. And he just doesn't have that anchor to defend the run. So when he turns his body like that, or he just loses leverage, he's going to lose that play altogether. And again, teams all season seem to favor running his direction. Can't blame him because he's probably the biggest liability against the run. But at the same time, he did show some positive stuff, specifically when he's on one-on-one situations with the blocker, and when he does put together good leverage and to be able to get full extension at his arms to lock out, then you have those plays where he stacks and sheds. But once he's trying to penetrate a gap like that and gives up his back, he's done, or he gets double teamed altogether. So again, that's why I think that he needs to have a role where he's strictly a pass rusher on money downs. Again, to be able to get stronger. Would I be surprised if he is starting next season? A little bit. I know you said earlier that he probably should be starting, but in terms of how they want to approach this defensive line, just blowing it up, starting over, I don't see him having a starting role.
Wow. Okay, yeah. So you think blow up. Yeah, he's still on the team. He's now a situational pass rusher guy.
A situational pass rusher. That's why I wanted to show him off the edge like that. Because if you have Tillery on the field, it doesn't. You're not going to fix what you're going through the off season. Yes, you're going to have upgraded personnel, but in terms his skill set all around, he's going to continue to probably be a guy that's a liability against the run on a consistent basis, and opposing offense, they're going to look at that and just run their way. And again, you have a full year under Brandon Staley's system, so it's adapting to that. But I think they're looking to bring in guys that have established themselves as people that can hold their own at the point of attack, but also supply that pass rush presence. And it seems like with Tillery, it's more just one-sided on that pass rush department. So that's, I guess you can say, a bold prediction. I don't see Tillery starting next season. And I know the chat right now is probably blowing up yup, get him off my team or whatever. But that's going to be my bold prediction is that he won't be starting next season, and he'll just be resorted to like a more of a reserve situational pass rusher.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Okay, chat. So fire away with either your questions, but also let me know. Do you think Tillery is going to be a starter next season, or do you think he's more of a situational guy? Not what you want to happen, because I know what the chat wants to happen, but what do you think is going to happen? I would still I'm for it. I'm for him being a situational guy at this point. We've seen enough from him. We know I think he's a good pass rusher, or can be, but as a run defender, it's just a big no-no for the most part. So yeah, I could absolutely see his role being that. But you hear
How's
from
how's the chat reacting right now?
the chat is well, there's a couple of here's a good example of how the chat's going. The chat is saying something like Tillery gives up his back more often than a $10 hooker. So if that kind of gives you a good indication of how the chat is going, that's
Okay.
kind of how the chat looks right now. Yeah, they're certainly not in favor of a Jerry Tillery. Tillery stinks. I hope Gavino's right. That's exactly what I predict happening. No, he's a backup, never started material. He played because of his draft status. Um, let's see. Thoughts on is it Tillery out of here? I guess then, okay, so two things. One, it would surprise me only because you hear that Tillery is the golden child, and he's the the guy that they
You're
just there's
talking
no
you're talking to a
accountability.
guy too that that really liked him coming out of college
Yeah,
too. So that's why I'm telling you what I think, and I'm not even being biased here. I'm just telling you what from what I saw this past season and where they're trying to go into next season. So
right.
yeah.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so then the next obvious question then, because you dropped a mini bomb there, obviously Jones at nose isn't going to happen, I would assume, but what does the defensive line look like next season then? So how do you I mean, you brought this on yourself, so now I gotta know how you're gonna fix this. How is Jerry Tillery the backup pass rusher? You don't have to say which player, but would you go like free agent for nose tackle and one interior defensive lineman? Would you go free agent nose tackle, bring back Jones, and then draft someone ahead of Jerry Tillery?
Okay, so
How
I'll go free agency, sign two.
okay.
So let's say Hicks and Joseph Day or something like that.
Okay.
Let's say let's say bring back Jones and then draft two. I'm eyeing second round and I'm eyeing early day three.
Okay.
So then
I
you
like
also
it.
have to factor in Fahoko and
Mhm.
Merrill. So this is a team that had depth issues. Keep in mind. So I'd rather there be some like solid players on that practice squad, and that's why I'm kind of like on the fence of like Fahoko being like on the active roster and all that. But
Mhm.
like this is a team that dealt with depth issues, and again, one guy goes out, you have another one that steps in, having to rely on Andrew Brown, who was solid for the most part. But again, they kind of neglected that issue because they shifted their gears to the offensive line and just supplying that support for Justin Herbert. You need to go to the other side of the ball and you need to learn from your Telesco needs to learn from his mistakes and get depth on top of the players that can perform at a high level right away. Because
Mhm.
again, you're going to have what you did with the offensive line. You're going to have those run into those issues, and it's not going to be good. So,
Interesting.
like I said,
Okay.
two free agents, two in the draft. And yes, how many picks do we have? 11.
11. Yeah.
Again, there's so many spots that the Chargers need to address though too. So I could see
Right.
them going with just two in the draft. So that brings us to four. Let's say, I mean, Jones comes back. That's five plus Tillery plus like what you have with Fahoko Merrill. So I don't know. That sounds pretty
Okay.
good.
Yeah, no, that definitely sounds reasonable. It's interesting you talk about blowing it up because again, I don't believe that Tillery's going to be a backup rotational guy. As much as I agree with the idea, I don't believe it. But I
Two,
will say I
yeah, I was
did
gonna say two free agents and the second round pick start.
okay. Wow. All right. The second round pick would start. Okay. So
Or the two free agent signings plus Justin Jones start.
I could see that. I could definitely see that. It's interesting though that we talk about this because I did hear. I thought this. person was, I'll say, frustrated. I'll talk to you after the live stream. They said that they wouldn't be surprised if the Chargers drafted 3 interior defensive linemen, which I think you could kind of shift that around to
If they
being,
wouldn't be surprised,
they wouldn't be surprised if they drafted 3 interior defensive linemen. I think you could shift that around to being, I wouldn't be surprised if they brought in 3 interior defensive linemen in general. But again, I don't believe it's going to happen, but then I was surprised that I heard that, and I'll talk to you after the stream, but it was a bit of a surprise, I'll just say that much.
I
So,
see them bringing in 4 or 5, and that's not even including, again, with what I told you, that was 4 right there too.
yeah.
But I guess with 11 picks, you can make a great point by taking a third one. I know I said 2, but again, if I'm looking at one round 2, because I don't want to take one round 1 and then one
Yeah.
early day 3 and then like one the last round or something, like this is a pretty good group and I can't wait to dive into it. And that's another thing I'm going to start doing here with the off season is addressing the edge defenders and interior defensive line. So
Mhm.
I can't wait to get into the film because it's a pretty good class. We know the guys at the
Mm.
top of the board with Jordan Davis, of course. Everyone
Sure.
knows that. But there's a lot of guys that have some intriguing things to their game that I feel like the Chargers might like. And
Mhm.
you also have to factor in, yes, you're looking at guys that can defend the run too, but you have to look at it from a standpoint of what Brandon Staley looks at the position. And
Right.
Clinton, he's kind of a good example. So yes, he's not like he's a big guy, but he's the guy that can get upfield. He can win with strength. Again, he's not going to be one that can hold his own at the point of attack, but you need someone that can also penetrate into the backfield too. So there are
Mhm.
certain things that at each position that Staley looks at, and you're looking at a guy with length and strength is a factor in there too, undersized and athletic guys. So yeah, I feel like he has his own like criteria to each position. So
Mhm.
but yeah, with hands, power, like that's definitely a factor in there. So don't go in there thinking just because he's a nose tackle that Chargers are going to bring him in. He has certain criteria that he's looking at
Mhm.
in terms of the people that he wants to bring in.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so then I guess a good way to wrap this up, I know you have more stuff to do, but just to wrap up kind of the draft talk, in your estimation, it's very hard to tell because they didn't draft an interior defensive lineman, but they did bring in some guys. Who would be a guy from the last draft, say a Davion Nixon or whoever, who would kind of fit that interior defensive line mold that Staley might be looking for? Who, I guess, to give the listeners and the audience a bit of an idea of maybe what they could be looking for. Who's a guy either at defensive tackle or nose tackle from the last draft that might fit what Staley's looking for in this upcoming draft?
Yeah, let me take a look because my mind's all on Rashawn Slater. So
Yeah, I think all of us were on Rashawn Slater once we got that pick in. And again, Rashawn Slater working out not too bad. I think Chargers fans were unanimously happy about that one, and it worked out pretty spectacularly.
so a guy that I think would kind of fit that mold in terms of what Staley is looking at is a Christian Barmore. That's
Okay.
that's that's a good
Yeah.
example right there. You have an attack style defensive
Hmm.
tackle, bigger body, violent hands, who's able to work through offensive linemen, but also work around them too. So again, with him
Hmm.
having heavy hands to be able to push blockers back while also being able to sustain his own at the point of attack, that's kind of like what you're looking at. So with him having like that first step, the hands, the upper body power, that's kind of what Staley could be looking for. So like if they're drafting last year, I think Barmore went second round. That's kind of a guy that I feel like fits what Staley is looking for because he's not necessarily a tweener.
Hmm.
Again, I think with the systems that he's worked with, he doesn't disregard tweeners because look at Andrew Brown. He brought him in. Draymond Jones is another good example too when he was with the Broncos and him being like in Fangio's system. So we should also not look at these big body guys. I guarantee you that he's going to select one of those tweener type guys, Draymond Jones-esque, Andrew Brown, who I liked Andrew Brown, by the way, but being able to move up and down the line of scrimmage too, be able to line up at different spots. So, but if we're looking in terms of like what he probably wants early on, Christian Barmore is probably a good example.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Chargers would be thrilled if they had a Christian Barmore on their team right now. I know everyone likes Asante Samuel Jr., and rightfully so, and he belongs on the team. But if you could also add a Christian Barmore to that interior, doesn't sound too bad to me. All right, let's dive into the rest of this film breakdown. What do you have next for us?
So if you watch the breakdown against the Bengals, this is probably my first breakdown with you guys. This would look familiar. So I wanted to touch up on Chris Rumph. Again, I think he finished the season with what? Correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler. 5 pressures.
That's correct. Yes, the fewest pressures among any edge rusher
3
rookie
of
with
them
75
came
pass
against the Bengals. So
yes.
there wasn't much after this game, and that would have been what, like 4 games later. He didn't finish off with anything, and we didn't really see him on the field against the Raiders either. So with Chris Rumph, because again, we had a question earlier, what they should do with Chris Rumph. They took him in the fourth round. They were drafting him to supply some edge depth, pass rush presence, and I guess when you look at the numbers, you could say it was probably underwhelming. But
Yeah.
Steely looks for at that position with the length and the explosive traits. So I'll kind of just go here and talk about like what year one was like. So again, they're utilizing him on twists and stunts and just being able to keep him free as much as possible. And that's how he was able to get that quarterback hit. He kept himself clean, and that's what he was relying on, was those athletic traits to get in the backfield. But this is a good example of what he needs to work on. So working against Isaiah Prince, the right tackle, he gets his arm on him. So it's just the counters right there. The only reason he gets to Joe Burrow is just the pure effort, because he's like a pinball. That's what I call him in the first video, is that despite, or even when blockers get their hands on him, it seems like he's always moving around and he's not taking himself out of the player. But if you want to win in this league, you need to either have some counters, or you need to be able to have some bend or some burst to be able to threaten that corner. Which again, when blockers get their hands on him, he's just still too light, undersized, where he can't rely on any kind of power to get into the backfield. And then in terms of the run, which this is probably my favorite play. Another thing, he's very loose, slippery, just being able to get into the backfield by evading the offensive lineman, and also the pulling H-back to get into the backfield and make a positive impact on that play. But with Chris Rumph, like, he's going to be able to have another full off season ahead of him. When they took him at the time, I understood it. I wrote a whole breakdown with the positives that he did and what he needs to work on. And it was just him needing to get stronger, to develop more counters and pass rush moves. And you can kind of see the deficiencies in his game this past season.
Right.
Again, he's going to be one that you need to keep clean as much as possible. So by utilizing twists and stunts, but in my opinion, I think they need more of a true pass rusher who has more of a, I guess you could say, overall well-rounded skill set.
That makes sense.
He's very raw coming into the league too. And I honestly think that there are some guys in this edge defender group that could be playing a little bit better than him in his rookie season. And I think that the Chargers need to take advantage of it, because again, he's going to be a guy that I expect him to take some steps going into year 2. But you need another guy, and Kyler Fackrell is also going to be a free agent, so you also have to look at that. But with Uchenna staying, we're assuming based on how he played, you have to fill that role behind him and Bosa. And again, with that they didn't get as much pressure as we would have liked them to, and it showed. And that was another reason for the issues with the pass defense all around. So one, yes, we have to address the interior defensive line, but the edge defender position needs to be addressed because you're really banking on that development from Chris Rumph. With adding more strength, defining his pass rush moves, and just becoming more well rounded. But there are some players in this draft, not even like in the early rounds, but just mid round guys that I think Brandon Staley could fall in love with and could step in year one and have more of an impact, because this is probably one of the deeper edge defender groups that I've seen in a little bit.
Oh,
So
wow. Okay. No, that's good to
yeah,
hear. And I think this makes sense too. Lorenzo McDaniel points out that Rumph probably won't break out until year 3. I'm sure everyone in their articles is going to say that, who's your breakout candidate in 2022? I'm sure Chris Rumph is going to be brought up a lot, but you would say that he's more of a 2023 future, year 3 sort of guy. It's not going to be this. I mean, it could be, but you don't project him
it
to
could be,
be.
especially with what they do with the interior part of the defensive line, because that's going to be a huge factor too, and that's going to make life easier on Joey Bosa and assuming Uchenna Nwosu. So you also have to factor that in too. So I think they're going to have Rumph on the field and put him in more favorable positions, whether
Mhm.
that's lining him out more of like a wide 9, or just getting him in in situations where he's running twists and stunts to just keep him as clean as possible. And coming into it, I just wrote that on my notes too, is that yes, he's an athletic pass rusher. He's got some intriguing traits. He's got the length too, but with him just being undersized like that, offensive
Yeah.
linemen are going to get their hands on him, and he's going to be taken out of the play, and just going to have to keep his make sure that his effort keeps him in the play. So yeah, that's a good point right there. I could see year 3 being a year where he finally puts it all together. But with next season, I kind of see him kind of making same type of impact, production aside.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I'd
Okay.
say 2023 would be a good year to finally break out.
Cool. Okay. I will save that article for a year from now when the Chargers are in the playoffs, of course, and I get to write about the next season. All right, so let's move on with this film breakdown. Is there one more play in here?
I think that one was it. So that's
Oh,
where
that was it. Just kidding. All
yeah.
right. So if anybody has any other final questions, feel free to get them in. Thank you so much for joining me. Yeah, a lot of changes need to be made up front. Will they make those changes? I don't know. It would surprise me if they blew it up as much as it would surprise me if they completely went with the exact same interior. Although at this point, I don't think they'll go with the same interior. Brandon Staley has now come out and said, yeah, we're going to fix this interior defensive line group. So what that means to him, I don't know. Hopefully, it looks more like good players rather than my favorite other players from the Broncos or the Rams, although they're not that bad. So we'll see what he does with this interior defensive line. And if so there's no other questions, I don't think any other questions are coming in at this point. Gavino, so you're doing a mock draft, it sounds like soon. Where can we find that? Is it coming out soon, or do we have to wait? Or
Yeah, I'm
talk about
actually
that.
writing it up right now.
Cool.
I'm looking at topics like so that's when we can kind of expect that, and we can kind of see the direction that one of the directions that the Chargers may go when it comes to the 2022 NFL draft. Again, it's going to be exciting with 11 draft picks,
Hmm.
and the offseason altogether with free agency too, to see what they do with the defensive line.
Yep, I can't wait to see what they do. All right, guys. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching and commenting and all that good stuff. Hope you learned something. Hope you have a better understanding of where the defensive line and the edge rushers are at this point. Do you want these guys back? Do you want to just blow the entire thing up? Do you want to fire everybody? Do you want to fire Telesco? Do you want to bring in all your favorite free agents and go 50 million over the cap like the Saints or whatever? Let me know what you guys want to do. Gavinos, thank you so much for joining me as always. Everyone for listening, thank you. And as always, take care and bolt up.